I think if you look at the grief when shit got real, it was after I kind of took off that professional armor and I was like, oh my God, what just happened? It was almost like a 3 to 4 month delay for me to when things really got processing. I had a dear friend, a very soulful friend of mine, reach out and say, you can't outrun grief. Don't try.
Hey, before we begin the show, I wanted to let you know you will notice that we had this interesting experience when we were talking about mediums, and I was sharing that I was going to have my first session the next day after the recording. I decided to leave it in there because it was interesting in that what happened while we were recording this came up in my session with the medium. So it was really fucking mind-boggling. It was pretty awesome. So I just wanted to leave that in there to let you know, like, hey, there was this thing that happened and it fucking came up and it was pretty cool. So go ahead, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Recently lost a baby girl. Lost my pregnancy earlier in 2023. I was 14 weeks pregnant, and on Valentine's Day went in to just have a usual checkup. We safely thought we were in the second trimester, which was a fool. We felt like fools, at least, when we realized that wasn't the case. And we found out that our daughter no longer had a heartbeat. And so I had, really, really struggled for a long period of time with that event. I can get into the details of kind of the whole saga that unfolded after that, where there is an actual bright spot in the darkness that I'm happy to share with you all. But I had just really been working through the grief and hadn't shared my story more broadly outside of that inner circle in about, 6, 7 months. And after, experiencing pregnancy loss and having was it real? And this feels like the biggest, baddest grief I've ever experienced in my life. I really needed just an outlet to be able to share my story, what happened, and then asking just for community support to help with some of the work that we had started to serve other people who had experienced pregnancy loss. So Ashley had reached out after seeing me post as kind of a step one of a healing process. And that's how we got here today. So It's been a messy, dirty, raw, but heartfelt and soulful and connected year with people. I will say that I have a son who's 2.5 years old, and I thought the duality of motherhood was hard, where for every, good thing, there's a bad thing, or for every great memory, there's but it was so hard to get out of the house type of a thing. And when you add the duality of motherhood, but also loss, it's like duality squared. So all the feels, all the feelings, and trying to just get through some of that with people who have been there.
Yeah. So this was recent, right? This was within the year?
Yes.
Could you take us back as much as you're comfortable to what the experience was like with the loss and losing your child?
Yeah. So, we had our routine 14-week ultrasound where we went in, and it was at 4:30 at night. It was raining in February. I remember the details like yesterday. They're seared into your brain. And we, walked in. We're going to go out and grab dinner afterwards for Valentine's Day. And they couldn't find a heartbeat on, the ultrasound. And your whole world just came crashing down in a matter. You could just tell from the look on the tech's face that things were not right. And, having had a baby previously and looking at the screen, you can just tell that things weren't right. And so seeing just that physical image, and then within a split second feeling like you were having a healthy baby to now being like a walking tomb almost, it was just it was the worst feeling I have ever felt in my life. We then went and had a conversation about 10 minutes later. So you get this news and then it's like, get in, get out, clinic closes at 5. And they gave me 3 options on how to, really move forward now with next steps. And the first was, go home and wait, because your body will, quote unquote, naturally, miscarry, which is such a myth. You can take the abortion pill, but I could not in that case because I was, 14 weeks. It's only safe up until 11 weeks of gestation. And I think a really big misconception is that the abortion pill is also a treatment path for people who have very wanted and very planned pregnancies that need to also have another option in addition to going home and waiting. And then my third option was to go and have what's called a DNC. This is where it's a surgical procedure to, remove and clear remains from my uterus. And what I learned in that is that the wait list for a DNC, because of recent restrictions and policy, I had to wait 6 days before I could actually receive access to care.
Oh my God.
And so I looked just at my doctor's face and I said, so I don't have an option. My option really is I have to go home and wait. And then I was just processing. I'm a type 3 overachiever. I'm like, let's get the steps. We need to know what's going to happen. Yeah. And just talking through the logistics of what that actually means. Going from seeing a happy, healthy baby girl to being handed plastic gloves and being told to put my daughter in a Ziploc bag was a really tough pivot for 15 minutes. So in that moment, my husband was like, let's get home. We need to just get home. And so at that time, we got home, we just sat there and it was like, will this be happening in 10 minutes? Will this be happening in 2 weeks? And you just have to sit and wait. So I went to work the next day. My husband went to work the next day. We are just living as if this does not happen. And I look back at that time and I'm like, how did, what? What? And so it was 2 days later, actually on February 16th, when the bleeding started and I began to miscarry. I was terrified. What are you going to see at 14 weeks? I didn't want to be alone. You got one pamphlet and I had plastic gloves and I was like, what? So I went to my nearest ER and just really was searching for help and support, and not just physical support, but emotional and spiritual support as well, of where do I go next and how do you even begin to start to navigate this? And unfortunately, at the ER, they told me that they were so sorry because I wasn't almost dying or because I wasn't too severe yet, that there really wasn't much that they could do. So they handed me a plastic bucket to go with the plastic gloves that I already had, and a pat on the knee, and told me, women do this all the time. You've got this.
No.
That makes it right.
Yeah. I even said at one point, I said, you can throw me out back by the dumpsters. Can I just not be alone?
Yeah.
Right.
And so in that moment, I ended up going home now again, not knowing, I've started miscarrying. What's this now going to be? What's the timing? And there aren't answers. I was Googling and it's like, do you go to a movie? Do you so ended up going home again, and it was 5:05, conveniently 5 minutes after my clinic closed again, when I passed my daughter. I was in my bathroom and the bleeding just would not stop. And I ended up hemorrhaging about 10 minutes later. And for those, hemorrhaging is where you lose a significant amount of blood in a short amount of time. And I'd called my OB after hours, and they have their standard, we'll call you back in 30 minutes while we can page the doctor. And by the time that call came back, I had lost consciousness, a third of my blood, and was passed out on my bathroom floor. So in that moment, I came to and was like, what just happened? And once again, the control freak or overachiever in me started barking orders at my husband. I work in women's health, the irony of this all. And I was like, I know this is bad.
Yeah.
So I said, call 911, call an ambulance. I wanted my son to be in the other room because he's obsessed with ambulances and fire trucks. And I didn't want to ruin that memory for him of seeing that and being scared that mommy's being taken out of the house. And so, at that time, not only was I losing a pregnancy, losing my daughter, but I was also thinking that I was taking my last breath as I was on the stretcher. And I just called out And I said, I love you, Landon. That's the name of my son. I said, I wanted those to be my last words. And so at that time, the Ziploc bag wasn't working for me either. I had asked my husband, I said, can you find a jewelry box? Is there a way to make this just a little bit more dignified? So I think he went to Home Goods. I don't even know the details, but I had my jewelry box from some cheap discount store with my baby girl, and I was unconscious in the ambulance, finally able to receive the care that I needed, but wasn't able to access in a timely way. So that's when it comes to not just the grief that you experience, but the actual trauma of that day of being close to death. I had lost a third of my total blood volume. And, you're going through that, you're coming in and out of surgery. And when I woke up in the morning in the hospital, they actually discharged me at 8 a.m. They said, you're good to go. They handed me a printout sheet that said to take an iron supplement. And then they sent me on my way. So I share these details with you all because as terrible as that medical experience was, and I am a person who sits in every position of privilege that exists where, we have a great medical system. I'm able to access and pay, was able to access and pay for care, works in the healthcare space. It's one of those things where these are very real stories that are happening. But the most painful part of all of that was walking out of those hospital doors from the same doors where all the other parents are walking out with their car seats and their bundles of joy. And it was the most gut-wrenching, empty feeling that I don't even wish upon my worst enemy ever. So,
man, thank you for sharing. I mean, this is audio only, but I'm just constantly holding my face. I can't believe that experience. There's a lot that kind of comes up for me. I think the first thing that I'm interested in maybe talking a little bit about is I remember the day when we found out that my wife's, her biopsy came back as cancerous. So this was the first of the bad news. And then after a month of testing, we found out it was stage 4, but I'll never forget that day where my whole world had changed and all the future that I thought I was going to have had changed. But when you were talking, I don't even know how to comprehend having your entire world change, but then also your daughter's gone. There was no moment of this is happening. It was just, this happened. It's done. It's over. And then, sorry, go home and let nature take its course. And have to go through that experience. I can't even imagine what that has to feel like. When you are going through all of this, where did you find support?
I had a best girlfriend of mine actually call me that morning because I had shared with her just the news the previous day. And the first thing she said, where she actually saved my life, was make sure you are not alone. I had a friend who was sent home, lost a lot of blood and lost consciousness. So there was, my guardian angel was looking out for me that day when she urged her to pick up the phone and tell me that. We don't talk about, that level of detail. And so that really helped me, not be alone. That's not something the clinic ever told me. That's not something the ER even said to watch out for. So when it comes to what we are letting women endure and the just lack of safety and care in that, I think that's one piece that I've come to learn. There's no medical standard of care for pregnancy loss. So for something that happens twice as much as heart attacks in the US, but also for some of the other support of where you turn to. My husband and I went and we sat in our closet and I just started crying. And I just looked at him, shaking, and I was like, who do we call? Who do we call?
Yeah.
We don't call the doctor. We don't call the hospital. We don't call I just looked at him and I said, who do we call? And so at least in that initial moment, we held each other. And we prayed and we just kind of waited. And so in that at least immediate short-term period, we were so alone.
Yeah. You felt isolated?
Very isolated. I instantly called, my mom. He called his parents, called my dad, and kind of the immediate close family, just letting them know. And it was so painful at that point where I needed to make one phone call, not 10. So I was like, hey, phone tree style, let people know. And then also like let them know that I'm not responding to text messages. So I think just being really clear of I'm not okay. I'm not going to be okay. And like the business as usual is not going to be business as usual, TBD on when it will ever be. I found out that it's not ever still, but that's kind of that immediate time. I will say since then, there has been such a tremendous community of support that has come out from the people you would expect the least. As you open up and share a story, you always get a story. And especially after, I was quiet for about 6 months because I was like, I can't get through the first sentence of this story without breaking down and crying and needing to stay in bed all day.
Yeah.
And so just kind of opening up the people who have experienced loss, it is every single one of us. And so it's just what's your flavor or what's your kind of specialty or special type. And, there are no words. That's the best response I heard from people. No one knows what to say. We suck at what to say. Yes, everyone says the wrong stuff with the best of intentions. But the things that were the most comforting, just kind of in the aftermath, was the people who were like, there are no words, but we're here for you.
Yeah.
And that connection and that just acknowledgement and just the sitting in it together is really what has been the most comforting and healing. There's no words and there's no actions and there's no magic recipe that will make any of this feel better. So.
Yeah, 100%. And it's almost so simple, but it's one of the hardest things to execute on, to just sit with somebody in their pain. Because there's a difference with trying to help and versus willingly go into that space with somebody. And a lot of times the experience I've had is like, it's like when you flip magnets around and you change the polarity and they just keep repelling each other. It's like, that's the energy that I feel so much out in the world, especially early on, where the words that people are saying seems okay. But like that energy is just like would repel me. And then it like creates this more and more and more isolation. So then you like run to the community that understands what you're going through because they understand.
It's almost like everyone's waiting for your happy ending or your redemption story. And it's like sometimes the answer is it doesn't come. This is just a part of being human.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really uncomfy. And I think one of the interesting things when I returned to work the next day.
Oh my God.
Wait, the next day?
Yeah.
After the surgery and stuff, or the next day after you found out?
Surgery was on a Friday. I was back at work on Monday.
What?
Yeah. So I should say next business day. Give myself a little more of a...
You got the weekend. There you go.
Yeah.
Because that also doesn't exist. Like, I mean, some companies, it's a little bit better, but like days off after loss, pregnancy loss, like does not exist. I think it's starting to become, you start to see it a little bit, but still, it's also deeply personal to have to like disclose that. So, taking that time off and then you're suddenly off, if you will, unplanned time off, which as a very organized person, I'm sure you are very organized about telling people when you're going to be off.
The double doozy of that was I was planning to share with my team that week at 14 weeks pregnant that I was expecting. So the conversation was, hey, we were pregnant, keyword were, now we're not. And here's where it was just the roller coaster of emotions. And then we go back to that uncomfy feeling.
Yeah.
Where how many of us have like true, deep BFF work people versus colleagues. I mean, there's like
Right.
different people that you feel comfortable with. But Ashley, to your earlier point, just bereavement policies don't typically cover or acknowledge pregnancy loss. So it's moving in a different direction, but that is something that I've uncovered as one of the WTF moments through all of this.
Yeah.
I also don't know if this is fun fact, but was speaking with our financial advisor and also learned that because I had a miscarriage, if I want to get life insurance, I'm not insurable.
What?
Oh, that does not surprise me at all.
Why?
So there's a lot of, well, if you look at, actuarial science and you look at the likelihood of like, whoops, this woman, she wasn't too good at that pregnancy thing. And whoops, she almost died too, but she didn't.
Yeah.
I'm high risk.
Yeah.
I'm expensive.
Before I like did all my gene testing around breast cancer, because my mom died of breast cancer, they actually told me to go get life insurance. They're like, before you do any of this, because you don't know what it will come back, but once it comes back and says, this gene looks a little fucked up, you won't get life insurance. So I had to like, I got it out like 2-3 years ago now. And it's just crazy. All of the like knock-on effect that, one very big thing causes. It's just, but I think like going back to just in those moments and like when you found out, it's so helpful. I mean, for most people, I think it's so helpful when you at least, especially in that situation, could have like a sense of like, okay, this is what's going to happen and this is what I do. Even if it's like, hey, this is what's going to happen. And unfortunately, like this is the only thing you can do. At least you can mentally prepare yourself to like say, okay, like I might pass out or this might happen. And, your husband can look out for that or things like that. It's just crazy that no one told you that. Like, how is that okay? And then on top of that, having to go through the mental side of it, which, the grieving aspect of it, you didn't even have time for that while you're trying to just figure out, how to take care of yourself and your child in that moment.
Yeah. The experience of having to go back to work so soon after that and then tell everybody. Yeah, I guess walk us through what that experience actually felt like.
I would say, I don't know if it's luckily or unluckily, but when it comes to just professional brand, I've liked to lead just very authentically and humanly and more on the side of oversharing because I find the good people and try to be a good judge of character. And then it's like, lay it all out on the table. Here it is. I am who I am.
Yeah.
Let's roll. That's not necessarily the corporate America blueprint, if you will.
Amen, sister.
So I want to just caveat that my story is perhaps a little bit of unique with that. And then also just in your position of, are you leading a team? Can you set the tone? Or are you maybe more junior in your career where you're needing to kind of follow the old guard? I chose the path of radical candor and was like, hey guys, this very human healthcare thing happened to me. I work in women's health innovation for a women's health team in a healthcare company. So
yeah,
I kind of put on my armor for several weeks and months and started telling my story very directly from the medical lens, where I almost removed myself as this is my story, where I said, this is member 1234 who had this recent experience, and these are all of the areas where the system failed her. So I began to process this very much as I almost dissociated myself from it, where I shared feelings with the very, very close people. I asked for support and was like, I don't even know what to ask for yet.
Yeah.
I'm just going to need some grace.
Yeah.
And what that looks like on a Tuesday versus 5 weeks from now, I don't know. This is my first time going through all of this. But please just know I'm trying my best. Please know that, like, even though this is my story now, I'm still at my core who I was yesterday before you knew this news. I'm forever changed. I'm going to now have this new facet to my personality. But let's just keep it rolling. So I'd say, at least from a professional standpoint, I almost went into just performance mode, if you will, because that's what we've been conditioned to do.
Was that an intentional choice?
For me, it was. Because I knew that, just putting your makeup on each day and trying not to cry in your back-to-back meetings as you're pulling up PowerPoints with moms and babies on it.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where it was too intersectional, where I don't feel like I was actually able to fully kind of get through it at that point, or like lose myself in work, because losing myself in work meant immersing myself in the very topic area that caused me so much pain.
Yeah.
So I did end up leaving that role in the summer. And that is where I think, if you look at the grief when shit got real, it was after I kind of took off that professional armor and I was like, oh my God, what just happened? It was almost like a 3 to 4 month delay for me to when things really got processing. I had a dear friend, a very soulful friend of mine, reach out and say, you can't outrun grief. Don't try.
That's right.
So that was some really good advice that I heard. And she's like, you're not going to like that this is a part of your story. She's like, but you will move through this to the point where you can function. She's like, but you will never function the same way that you did before, because your life will never be charmed like it once was. And so in that, I was like, oof, there's some facts.
Yeah, that
is facts.
I mean, holy shit, that is so well said. And I mean, it's like, it's the same story of every single person in every type of grief. I had the same thing too. It's just like, I am not the same person that I was the day before my wife died and then the day after she died. That has completely changed. My whole outlook on life has completely changed. There is this lens or this haze that exists over the world now going through it. It doesn't mean that there's not bright spots. It doesn't mean that like everything is doom and gloom, but it certainly has shifted and changed, and it changes for the better. For me, it's changed like the perception of like what's important. It's less lip service to it and more of like, okay, I feel more equipped to take action when I feel equipped to do anything. So the summer hits then, right? So then everything kind of falls apart for you, or rather you're confronted with your grief at that point. What is your reaction to that?
I will say my reaction was, oof,
That's a good reaction.
sucks. It felt like I was almost like I gained 100 pounds overnight, because making coffee in the morning, making this, like just everything just felt sluggish.
Yeah.
I have always prided myself on being a very go-getter, productive, all these different, and it's like, that was just not even attainable if I would try. It felt like my day-to-day living just felt like a marathon. And so I, in that moment, had to make a very intentional choice where I said, I am going through this, and I also have a 1.5-year-old son who I need to show up, and I need to be I want to be the best version of a mother that I can be for him. And I need to put all of my energy units and attention units, where even if it's at like 10% of full strength, like I need to treat that as my most valuable resource, and I need to then channel it to the right place. And so many things fell off the like to-do lists and the path, because it wasn't showing up as a parent.
Yeah.
And in that time of just kind of that heaviness, I was like, I can't do this alone. There was just such a realization where I was like, I'm going to turn to things that make me feel like I'm cocooning or isolating, of like, it might be reality TV. It might be staying in bed for a long period of time. It might be having that extra glass of wine, where it used to be for fun and social, but now it's to just kind of feel a little bit of like comfort. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, ooh, these all feel like they could be very slippery slopes to isolation, to going to even darker of where I don't want to go. And so I knew that my almost default mode, because I wanted, like, my first sense was put the armor on to be performative, if you will. Like, I was like, I can't do that in my like life. I don't want to do that in my life. And so I just need to be really honest with where I'm at. I need to be vulnerable, and I need to trust that the right people will show up for me in the right spaces at the right times. And I realized that the opposite of like addiction and isolation is connection. And so that's where I'm like, I need to just stay as connected as I can be with the people who aren't that like opposite energy or like the magnetic forces.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So I found myself drawn to people who have experienced profound loss. And I also oddly had a series of events that were just, I have met more people who had parents who have passed, siblings who had passed, kids who had passed than I ever had in my entire life. To the point where I asked my husband, I'm like, am I wearing a billboard where people just feel like she looks rough? And he's like, I just truly feel like the right people are being put in your path to provide you the exact support that you need. I had a dear friend of mine, she was a colleague for 7 or 8 years, call me one day in the summer, and she said, I'm coming over, I need to see you. I have some information that you might want to hear to make your heart better. And I was like, sounds good. Come on over. I thought we were setting up a play date with our kids or something like that. And she came over and she said, Ashley, I am a medium. And she's like, I've shared this with you before. You've been very open to this. Like you know, and I joke with her, like she works for like a clinical research team. So when you talk about like over indexing on like Earthside data and research, the fact that she was the person sharing and delivering some of this news with me, it just added like so much street cred to my Earth brain, where it's like, it was like the perfect spirituality starter pack, where she was able to share, and she did not know the extent of my loss or what I had happened, but she said, your daughter has actually been trying to contact you and wants you to know some very strong messages of like love. She is okay. She's not alone. And she gave me 4 very specific signs and symbols to look for as it relates to her. And they were not like, here's a butterfly, or here's like, they should look, or, you know, some people have butterflies. That's no knocks on that sign. Each person's very unique. But she was like, you are going to see the hottest of hot pink flowers. She's like, that is the one sign. She's like, you're going to see crowns. She's like, and not just, you know, pointy crown. She was very specific about the crown. And one of the messages or kind of things that really just, it freaked me out at first, but it turned into something that I've come to love, is that, remember that jewelry box that I told you about that was like the random cheap discount store one? It has a crown on it with the exact shape, size, specifications of all of that. And she also said that there was a sign of a conga line. And I am like, a conga line? Like, this is very oddly specific. I danced my whole life. And so the fact that she's up there doing the queen thing, or out there, wherever there is, and doing the queen thing and in a conga line, having a great time, it brought me such immense peace from a way that I never, or an outlet that I never experienced peace from before. And then the miracles that just started happening, the synchronicities, the people and the symbols and the things that have come since then, I truly had the most magical summer. Wow. Where it gave me the juice and the gas to be able to get through what I think was kind of the darkest inflection point, at least, with the, oh my gosh, what just happened to me? Or I'm going to claim that it was the darkest inflection, because I don't want to ever be that dark again.
No, that's awesome. You know, it's interesting to hear about the story with the medium. I had a friend, a colleague actually that I worked with the day after my wife died, reached out to me and told me some stuff. But it comes up pretty often, I would say, in the episodes where people go to mediums. I have a really close friend. His dad passed away when he was 2. He goes on the regular. And I've just had other like trusted, close people in my life. You got to go. And then I had an experience where there was somebody in my life who was around that and a medium and stuff and was like, hey, your wife wants to contact you. And I've just been like, no, I can't do it. I'm scared for a whole host of reasons. I don't know. And actually tomorrow I have an appointment to go to a medium. I finally gave in. And it's interesting that you brought that up and how it brought you peace, because I've just been a nervous wreck to do this. But at the same time, like everybody, literally every single person is just like, oh, it brought me so much peace. So I got my list of questions that I'm like, because I talk to my wife every day and I'm just like, if this is happening, please fucking answer some of these questions or like something, right? But so it's I just say that all to say of like, I'm finally going. It's been 3 years. I did it. Tomorrow, 4:30. Hopefully it brings something to me. I don't know. But it's also very nerve-wracking because I'm like, if I'm actually going to hear from her again through this person, how am I going to respond to that? Like, I haven't heard from her in 3 years and it feels like it's been a lifetime.
I know that you guys mentioned you're on this new platform right now, but as you said that with the list, there was a huge thumbs up sign that came on your screen all of a sudden. I don't know if you saw that or Ashley saw that, but it was like one giant thumbs up symbol that came up as creepy. You were talking about this.
She's going to be there.
You know what's even weirder?
She's going to be there.
I was telling my buddy last week, who he's the one that keeps telling me to go. And as I was explaining it to him, he was like, whoa, hold on. And he was like, there's an orb over your head right now. And I was like, fuck you. Like, stop it. Like, whatever. But anyways, yeah, that's crazy. So to get back to you, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, because even if it's just for me, it's just one more confirmation that tomorrow should hopefully be a positive experience, whatever that means. I did want to ask you, you mentioned really coherently this whole idea and thought process that you had of kind of going through that dark time. And the 2 questions I have are, 1, did you feel that coherent through that time of making these things very intentionally? And also you mentioned that one of those things was showing up in vulnerability. What did that actually look like in practice?
Yes. So I will say that it was a very intentional phase because I was feeling so uncomfortable, feeling like this big pot of spaghetti noodles that were just all mushy gushy. And I was just like, I don't even know where to start because I don't even think I'm going to ever feel good again. Like it was the most discombobulating, disorienting. Like it was a feeling that I truly struggled with as a person who's like, hey, do the task, achieve the thing. So it's like I almost had to create my own structure in order to not lose my mind. So there's probably some listeners who are like, oh, this lady, she sounds pretty well tight. But, you know, when it comes to just kind of the phase of life I'm in, like you're a busy working mom, like you kind of have to have those systems. And it was just one of those things where I'm so grateful for my son because I truly think when it comes to like a mother's strength and going deep into things that you haven't done before, I'm like, I don't know if I could show up this way for just me.
Yeah.
I'm doing this truly for him. And I'm coming to this right now with the tools that I actually have or the skills that I've used that have served me well before. Now, would I recommend that to a friend? Probably not. But that's what worked for me. And I think the big piece in all of this is everybody grieves in their own way. And I may have been a very type A structured griever this summer. I might be the most fluid, go with the flow griever next winter. And that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And then your second question, I forgot the second question, CJ. I'm sorry.
That's okay. What did it look like practically to show up and be vulnerable? You mentioned that was one of the things that you did.
My biggest thing I noticed at first was I was apologizing for crying.
Oh, wow.
I was apologizing for crying as people asked about how I was. And I said, I'm not doing okay. And I caught myself being like, I'm so sorry, wiping my tears. And I had a woman reach over and she's like, Ashley, you lost your baby.
Yeah.
You can cry. And so that was the first thing where I was like, if there's anything I can cry about before, like I've been really upset about things where it's like, I did my hair and now it's raining outside. Like I've cried about that before. Like somebody could mock you for that. Nobody's going to mock your dead daughter.
Yeah.
So I think that was the first piece of just feeling really comfortable with my emotions. And like letting them be and honoring and acknowledging them. That really was one piece. And then also just being real with myself about what I was struggling with, where I said, one of the things, I grew up as a Lutheran. I said, I'm really struggling with my faith right now. Like my grief feels bigger than any church or lesson I have heard on Sunday. I said, and this is where I can lean in or I can be curious. I said, but like right now, I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with connecting with my husband right now because our grief speed is different. Like we each experienced the same loss, the only loss that like my parents or his parents or sisters, it's like they all lose in their own ways, but he was the only parent in that with me. And I'm not quote unquote better, and he's functioning and doing great. And what's wrong with me? And so I think there's just moments like that where, I perceived he was doing great. Like that's where you can be vulnerable with like checking in of how are you doing? I'm struggling here. And what we've learned is like we each have our moments of highs and lows and how do we show up better for each other. And so to get back to just the question, it's honoring your feelings, becoming emotionally mature in a society that's not emotionally mature. We're not. And then also being willing to let some friendships or relationships that you thought were the real deal go.
Yep.
Because you've outgrown them. And that, I always think of growth as like upwards trajectory and it's just like you've grown in different ways that the puzzle pieces no longer fit. So
it really sounds like it was being willing to be vulnerable with yourself.
And honest.
Yeah.
Honest.
Yeah. I could definitely relate to that. And it's like every time I do it and I have like these amazing therapy sessions and like I've been to so many different modalities in therapy and I've done so many different things. I mean, not just with my grief. I mean, because I've also been a long time mental health struggler, but like I would like, I get to these places I even did this summer where I was just like, I've had this huge growth and this is amazing. And this is what I'm like excited about and et cetera. And then the holidays hit and it just fucking ran me over. And now I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like back at this mountain and I'm like, now I have to like be honest with myself again. And I'm like, okay, I think I was making assumptions. Thought that this was better, but maybe it wasn't. I've had like childhood trauma that's coming up again. And I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like it's like back to the thing of you mentioned, it's like what you really needed was somebody who could just say, this isn't okay. This sucks. Validate you and just sit there and be in those feelings with you. And that's hard, but I think it's even harder for us to do it for ourselves and to show up and to just be like, this is the truth. This is the truth. This is the truth. Whether I like it or not, this is the reality of what it is. And you were talking about work too, about how like you had to put on this armor and it was like hard to like, you wanted to disassociate from that or back-to-back meetings without crying. And man, I could relate to that. It was just years of, luckily I was on Zoom and I would have to like quickly turn my camera off and I would just be crying, trying to wipe my tears away, turn it back on. I'm excited to talk. And you just feel so shitty because you're like, I can't possibly engage with this meeting right now because all I feel is this intense heartbreak. And to have to like get through that, it's so much. It's so much. But there was one thing you said. You said making assumptions about that your husband was okay. Did you open up that conversation with him, and did that shift and change how you guys grieved through this and grieving together?
On the daily, yes. It's one of those, you were mentioning about the, steps forward, steps back. I already went through this, all of those different pieces. And that's so real. And the thing I would add to that too is just that inner voice that you have that's so hard on yourself. There is not a person on this earth that would ever tell me to get over it sooner, or why aren't you through this yet? There's not a person on this earth. I think I've said that to myself at least 3,000 times in the past month. And it's like quieting that inner voice or that inner critic. And what I've also found is that inner voice or that inner critic with my partner now, making sure that we're not inner critiquing or critiquing each other.
Yeah,
and that's been, I think, a big piece where, I'm like, he probably thinks I'm not through this yet, but I'm mad that he's moved on so quick.
Yeah.
Or, it's just, those are not productive. They're not helpful. They're not loving. And so just returning back to, talking about baby girl, talking about ways that we can honor her, being really real in, I'm really struggling with this today, back off, or, hey, this date is coming up and I don't want to be a puddle of tears. Like, can we do something fun together? Can you help support each other? I think that just finding the people that can connect or be there, whether it's in your family or a friend or whoever, I've found just to be important. And the dates just keep coming. I don't know why I thought, so my birthday was about a month after this happened. And I was convinced, or at least I convinced myself, that because I was a year older, this whole experience was a last year thing, and now it's a this year thing. No. And the pages turned, so I'm fine. And I cried on my birthday the entire night because I was like, I'm not better. and then this is the corporate side of me. It was then April 1st, and I was like, oh, it's Q2 on the fiscal year. I'm like, Q2 new you.
Oh my God.
Like,
no way.
I'm now going to be different, and this is going to be better. And I lied to myself that way.
Yeah.
What are the other dates? It was would have been her due date. I was like, now I'm better. And then it was all the first holidays that you go through. And I'm like, now I'm better. Or maybe it's the anniversary of the loss. And I'm just like, okay, girl, stop lying to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost just like, well, I hit that milestone. I made it. I survived. I'm good. Like, no wonder it fucking hit you like a ton of bricks in the summer. Yeah, absolutely. There is some form of a parallel here. So when my wife died, the first thought I had was, don't fucking tell me that my kids are going to keep me alive. I was very resistant to that idea for a while. And that's something you mentioned, like having your son do that.
Interesting.
Also, a quick shout out. I have had people tell me, get over it. That same vein. I have had people say very hurtful things to me, but that's an aside. So I had this experience where, like, that's just an aside.
We won't talk about that big huge thing. Yeah, can we put that aside?
I know we're on audio. My jaw's on the floor right now.
It was worded differently, but that was the sentiment, and that's what was said to me.
Oh, yeah. I'm so deeply sorry that you had to experience that.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was an interesting experience to kind of have that happen while I was like really deep in it. But like, it was this experience of one where I was just like, I'm like, my kids aren't keeping me alive. They're making this harder because now I have to care for them and I can't. So it made, like, to your point, that inner critic was just like, you're a piece of shit. You are not caring for your kids. They lost somebody and they only get half of what everybody else is getting who has a full family, quote unquote, a full family. And it was like this idea for so long where I'm just like, they are now being stunted in what they're going to be able to accomplish in life. They're being stunted what they get out of school, with everything, because I tried for so long to be two parents to them, and it was killing me, like literally physically. I'm like, I was getting sick all the time because I was exhausted, sleeping like 2 to 4 hours a night. And then we all kind of went our separate ways, and we all kind of grieved on our own, and each of the kids went through varying degrees of their grief. Not that they've stopped, because it keeps morphing and changing as they go through these milestones, which Ashley can definitely speak more to. But then there was this period, I want to say it was probably the beginning of this year, where we started to come back together, and we became a family unit again. And where I looked back and I was like, oh, they did keep me alive. They did keep me going. Even the decisions that I made this year, like my decision to leave my day job and my extremely successful career in tech to do this full time, like it was so much about what I would be able to do in terms of showing up for them and showing up for the people now that I truly want to serve. Mm-hmm. But there was this experience where we kind of went our separate ways, and we came back, and that's what I hear a little bit in your story of how like you guys, you and your husband, had to kind of grieve, and now it's like you're doing this check-in every day, and you're like starting to come together where that grief is shared now. And then your vulnerability to share that with people, I just wanted to give you a lot of credit, because I still don't. Very rarely. My grief became my own thing because I just felt judged. A lot of times that was a projection, but I just felt judged, and it was this whole thing of people were just like, you're better now, right? Like, let's go back to how things were. And I was just like, oh, I get it. My grief's my own now. Nobody really wants to sit in this. I'll go cry when I get home and all those things. But yeah, so that's a little bit kind of the parallel there.
Well, we've met now. We've intersected. So your grief's not all your own. And
that's right.
You can text or call when you need it. You've got a new friend.
That's awesome. So, okay, you shared a lot. I'm really grateful for that. I think in the beginning, though, you mentioned how your grief and this pain, how you've kind of transmuted it into something in this force for good. And I'm wondering if you'd maybe want to share a little bit about what that looks like for you and what you're doing.
Absolutely. So the interesting part about the story, at least with pregnancy loss, is that, when you're pregnant, everything is not about you. It's about the baby after the baby arrives. And what's interesting is after you lose a baby, everything's still all about the baby.
Yeah.
People are asking, how are you doing, and still checking in. But a lot of it still is very much the grief of the child, and not necessarily the grief of who you were as a person or you're forever changed. And so I read a very interesting article where there was research that showed that creativity was the antidote to grief. And so keeping your hands busy and being creative really is a great way when you're just in those moods of like, I was like, I promised myself I'm going to create more than I consume, because like I need to bring more things into this world to bring good. And when I either consume, that's like something that brings me into just that dark place. So I am successful at that 15% of my days, but it is a North Star that I am working on. So I started crocheting. I have been crocheting blankets for my friends when they have their first babies. And so I've made, 50 some blankets over the years, because it's something that's just a hobby of mine. When I go back to in the story where I walked out of those hospital doors empty-handed and was just totally gutted, I told myself, I said, I don't want any woman or family to experience that empty-handedness ever again. They will be empty-hearted. They will be like not knowing where they're going, but I don't want them to feel empty-handed, at least in that moment. And so what I thought of over the summer is I was like, I'm really struggling. Let's be creative. I'm going to bring these to our local hospital that had saved my life. And I said, I met with their grief coordinator. Shout out to Jenny. She's super rad. She is like the most loving, compassionate, open-minded person, where when I shared my story with her, she is like, this is unacceptable. We are going to make it better for people moving forward. And so we ended up creating blankets, and They've been received so well from the women who have experienced loss over the summer that she asked if there could be more or if we could continue this work. And so going back to when I shared my personal story and set up that GoFundMe, that was in October where I said, I'm going to share my story. I haven't been working for a period of time. I said, I'm asking for community donations to help fund the supplies for the yarn and the materials, but this will be something that I would love to create and continue doing this at least for the rest of the year for the hospital. We raised 8 times our original fundraising goal in the first 36 hours of having
Oh
that
my
campaign
gosh.
up.
It was amazing.
And the stories and the sharing and the just community response has been remarkable. Everybody has experienced loss or knows somebody who has experienced loss because pregnancy loss affects 1 in 4 people, which equates to about 1.5 million experiences each year in the US alone. So what we have done is the local news came over, did a story for this because it received such great attention, and we've now gone national. So we have a crochet crew of about 165 people from ages 13 to 85 that are crocheting blankets, and we have 100 blankets that are currently being made, and we have successfully achieved the milestone of all people experiencing pregnancy loss at that hospital, which is the largest birthing hospital in the state of Minnesota, will not be empty-handed for over a year. Oh. So that was kind of step 1.
That's amazing.
We're wrapping up around the holidays, but the stories and what people have shared just about the ability to help volunteer in a way that's not at a specific time or date. There's a lot of older women who have experienced loss that may not be able to volunteer, but this is a passion of theirs. We have some, I call them our like chronic repeat offenders. I had a woman whip out 10 blankets in 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Where she's like, I can't watch one more football game and like not keep my hands busy.
So I should try that.
I feel like we're connecting a passionate group of people who love to create.
Yeah.
So the supply is meeting the demand and it's caring for the moms. So we are formally establishing a nonprofit organization to continue this great work. I'll give a little tease to the podcast listeners here. But the organization is called Comforter.
That's
kind of
great.
A nice play with blankets and comfort her. It felt clever at the moment when we picked it.
I love it.
And so we're getting websites set up and socials set up to be able to continue, creating partnerships and to not have this work go to waste. So I can't eliminate miscarriages. I can't fix the hospital system overnight. I can't, get a medical standard of care for pregnancy loss overnight. I will do that before I leave this earth. I'm just stating that because this is unsafe and unacceptable for people. But I'm hoping that we can start to help people feel comforted and less alone as they experience this today, while we use the momentum and kind of the groundswell of this organization to advocate for, safe healthcare for pregnancy for women in this country. So that's the next step.
That's fucking amazing. That's awesome. Yeah. I'd love to hear how people take their pain and create so much love and these moments of connectedness in the world. I think it's interesting. It's all you can mention. It's like, well, I'm going to share my story, and then this GoFund happened. And that's exactly what this podcast is stories are the most powerful things we have. They are the impetus for change. It's the thing that we resonate with. Like, there's a reason why the hero's journey works so well, because there's this deep primal thing in us as humans that resonate with stories that can effectuate that change. So that is incredible. Yeah. How much
that's amazing.
You've been able to do already. Yeah. That is absolutely incredible. And I love hearing that. Shit. I have no words. Yeah.
There's nowhere else to go from there.
I just want to, there's nowhere else to go. That's just amazing. But like we ask everybody, if there's one piece of advice, and you've given us amazing advice, and if I could just distill this entire episode and just put it out and be like, here, this is grief. like the way you've communicated is just fucking amazing. So very grateful for that. But is there one thing that you would want to share with somebody who is going through what you have gone through?
Yes, I would say there's one for yourself and then there's one action to do. So the first is very much that mindset of silencing that inner critic and really having and replacing that with an inner visionary. Your life will never look the same. Your plans for the future will forever be thwarted or different. But I think giving yourself the permission to have a visionary mindset versus I shoulda, I woulda, I'm not, I'm this, really will help get you into at least a neutral headspace to show up for your life the way that you want to. So I think that's, at least for yourself, the biggest piece that I would have of like the inner work that you can do, not dependent upon anyone else. I'd say the second piece of that is truly letting people and allowing them to show up for you and be able to help. Because by being vulnerable, that's like one piece of the equation. But everyone on this earth has a purpose, and everyone on this earth needs to be able to like help show and share love. And by you taking the steps to be vulnerable, you might just be helping another person fulfill their purpose. So allowing, like, you're not a burden, you're not everything. There might be that person out there where you're that missing, you talk about the magnetic tile. Yeah. It's like, that's the perfect energy. And they're going to come from places that you wouldn't expect, ages, spaces, wherever. And so I think, you know, there's only so much you can do, but recognizing we're all interconnected. The light will always win and the darkness won't last forever. I think I sound like I don't want to be that like bad wall art that you see in houses, but like there are some times where you do kind of just have to remind yourself of that, because sometimes Tuesday sucks.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And again, we're so thankful for you sharing your story with us, and we, you know, being vulnerable with us and showing up and sharing all those details, and for the incredible things that you're doing with your pain. And, you know, we are a week away from Christmas. So hopefully, you know, getting through these holidays won't be as dark as they were this summer, but being in a dark place right now with these holidays, you know, that's never a guarantee. But yeah, we appreciate you coming on, and we're so thankful.
Yes. Thank you both so much. The work that you do is important. It's meaningful, and it's going to help people feel less alone. So I'm very grateful. And you've got a fellow grief buddy now too. So I'm around. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.